Okay, we're here with Mark Passio in South Philadelphia, and Mark, thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
Alex, thanks so much.
So you organized this For Your Mind conference. The first one was 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay, and so how did that go?
It was great. I mean, it was beyond anything that I expected, and you know, a lot of people asked us to do another one after that was over. We did that in 2011. And it was really successful. We held it in the Northern Liberty section of Philadelphia. We got about 200 people each day. It was a Saturday and a Sunday. And afterward, everybody was asking us, are you going to do another one? You know, people who attended, speakers as well. And I was at first kind of loath to the idea because it was so much effort, you know, and it was worth it, certainly. I'm not going to say it wasn't worth it, but it was just like so much thrown onto so few people as far as the amount of work that went into it. And I just wanted to see it, you know, done in a way that was a little bit more distributed, that the workload was a little bit more distributed and people would step forward and kind of, you know, all take part in a more communal sense to get an effort like this done. And so I said, well, if we do it, I definitely don't want to make it a yearly thing. I wanted to do it in 2 years, and, you know, do it biannually. And we started up another organizer team in 2012 and started putting together For Your Mind 2 for 2013. And very unfortunately, the same thing happened. It was a whole lot of work dumped on a very small core organizational team, and very few people took the brunt of the effort financially, the financial burden of this effort as well. We did have some contributors, and we did have, you know, a couple of good fundraisers where people contributed, and we raised some funds that way. But largely it still fell to a very small core organizational group, which is what I did not want to see happen for the second time, but the same pattern repeated itself. Part of like why I really wanted to do this is that explain to people the importance of action, of getting involved in efforts like this, so that it's not just a few people doing it. You know, there's people putting out a lot of great information, but they need a lot of support. You know, they need people to come forward and support them, and to also be doing the same things that they're doing, putting out the information themselves as reinforcement and as, you know, getting the information out there to a wider circle of people. But as far as the event itself is concerned, I absolutely have no complaints. It went off beautifully, and the information that was shared was so empowering, and the energy that was held by the crowd and the people who attended couldn't have asked for anything better. The event itself, you know, logistically went off very smoothly, and I think no one there who attended will ever forget what they witnessed there, you know, over these 3 days in 2013 here in Philadelphia. So, as far as the event goes, I have absolutely no complaints whatsoever. As far as organizing a third one, I don't know if I'll be personally involved in that effort. I would like to see some new blood step up and take the reins, you know, pass the torch, so to speak, and I'll contribute in the form of information and speaking if I'm invited, of course, and that would be the role I would like to take if there is a future For Your Mind event.
Yeah, I can see how definitely it took a lot of energy and finances to pull this off, so I congratulate you for that, plus 24 speakers in 3 days is quite a bit.
Yeah.
And you gave a presentation on Saturday evening, the 27th, that related to some of the New Age disinformation that's out there, belief systems,
right,
that in a profound way is holding people back from truly stepping outside the box and seeing reality as it actually is.
Yes.
And I kind of want to do this interview to talk about some of those concepts and a few others that you talk about on your radio show.
Sure.
What on earth is happening? So give us a synopsis of...
Well, my presentation was called New Age Bullshit and the Suppression of the Sacred Masculine. So I talk a lot about, on my radio show and podcasts, the suppression of the sacred feminine, wanting to keep people in, you know, me only thinking, and not have any compassion or care about their fellow human beings, and you know, understand that we're really all in this together, and we have to come together as a people to understand that, you know, our basic underlying motivations are pretty much the same. We want the same things. We want freedom, we want peace, we want to live in harmony, we want a clean environment to live in, etc. And that dynamic of care to get those things accomplished is so suppressed in society. It's the suppression of the feminine is very, very much taking place, and I've explained that a whole lot in the work that I do and in my presentation series and in my podcast. But what I wanted to do for the Free Your Mind conference was to explain how the opposite dynamic, the sacred masculine, the principles of self-defense and the self-preservation instincts are also very under threat, and they're also very suppressed. Maybe in many ways, possibly even more so than the sacred feminine principles, because they are putting out these notions in the New Age movement and in religion to get us to stand down and not take action. So that's what I spoke to at the Free Your Mind conference as part of my presentation.
Yeah, it's happening on a lot of different levels. I mean, I remember back when I was 18 years old, starting to notice that trend in society, the demonization of self-defense, and that we do need to distinguish the difference between violence and one's right to self-defense, which you've been doing a lot of work to articulate. But a lot of people don't understand that. Could you go a little bit more into what people do need to understand along those lines?
Sure. There's a difference between force and violence, and the two terms really should not be used interchangeably. They're not the same. And a lot of people try to use these words to mean the same concepts. And again, it's a very dangerous thing to obfuscate the definitions of words like that. We really have to understand that there's a huge difference between these two terms, force and violence. So what force is it's the capacity to do work or to use energy or to create change in some form. That's a simple, almost, it's a scientific definition of force, really. I mean, you look up force in any kind of a physics book or anything like that, and you'll see it's the capacity to do work or to create change. And so anything that we do is an application of force. Any basic action is an application of force. I mean, for you to go get a drink of water, you have to use force to pick up the glass and turn on the faucet, and lift the glass to your lips. It's all forces at work. And that's all really force is. There's no connotation to the usage of the force. It's a definition that means you can actually create change in the physical world. Now, there's an abuse of physical force. When you are abusing it, using it the wrong way, not using it within the scope of your rights, then force can turn into the dynamic called violence. Now, what violence is the initiation of force that you had no right to initiate. So you're starting something with the ability to use force, okay, to create some form of change that is wrong, that you have no right to initiate. So in other words, if I'm on the street and I want your wallet, okay, because I currently don't have any money in mine, and I take out a knife and tell you I'm going to cut you, or even attempt to stab at you unless you will turn over your property to mine, I initiated force. I used force in a way that I had no right to use it in. That right didn't belong to me, and I'm trying to take something that isn't mine, that I have no right to take. Therefore, that's violence. And the main thing that distinguishes the two is force is always in harmony with natural law. It's always moral, because you're not taking anybody's rights when you use force. There's no violation of rights. When you use violence, there's always a violation of rights. And therefore, force you have a right to take, but violence you never have a right to take. It's always in opposition to natural law. So here's an example. Okay, let's use the same example. I'm attempting to rob you with a knife. I say, turn over whatever valuables you have, or I'm going to harm you. I'm going to cause physical harm to your body with this knife. That's violence. And the reason that it's violence is because I initiated it. I started it. See, a big obfuscation in the whole, force/violence dynamic. You'll hear this a lot with parents and teachers. They reinforce this lie to people when they're growing up, most of all, that it doesn't matter who started it. Well, you'll have two kids fighting, and one kid punches Well, you have two kids arguing maybe and disagreeing on something. One kid punches the other in the face. Well, that's violence. He started it. If the other person defends their physical body, that's not violence. That's defensive use of force. So in the example I was giving you, I attack you on the street with a knife, demand your valuables, and you happen to be armed with a 9mm handgun. And you take that out and you put a bullet in me. You did not commit any violence. That was not a violent act. Contrary to what most people will think. They've been conditioned very well through the obfuscation of words and definitions of words to think of that as a violent act. You see, the word violence comes from, the noun violence comes from the verb violate, to violate. So you have to violate somebody's rights through coercion, okay? Through the initiation of undue force to constrain, to compel, or to coerce somebody against their will in a way you had no right to do. I had no right to come at you with a knife and demand your wallet. I did it. I initiated it. Therefore, that was the commission of the violation of your natural rights to remain unharmed and to be allowed to keep what you've lawfully earned. Okay? So I committed the violence because I initiated the abuse of the force. If you respond in that moment to me with a usage of force that is sufficient to put down that violence, you have not committed any violence. You have not violated my rights to remain unharmed, because I have abdicated those rights to remain unharmed by taking that act of violence and putting it into motion. I initiated that, and therefore my right to remain unharmed at that point was abdicated by me. If you respond with force, that's not a violent action. I'll give another quick example. The sport of boxing. Okay? You'll hear people say boxing is a very violent sport. There's no violence in boxing, ladies and gentlemen. None. Zero. Zero. Okay? There would be violence in someone assaulting someone that did not want to be assaulted and pummeling them with their fist. That would be violence. But boxers are there as professional athletes who are making a conscious free will decision to participate in a contest of force. Therefore, nobody's rights are being violated in this contest. They both agreed to be there. They're not being coerced to be in that ring. They're making a free will conscious decision to be in that ring together and to compete in a competition of force. So boxing is a very forceful sport. It's a competition of force, certainly, but there's no violence because no one's inherent natural rights are being violated in this contest of force for the main reason that they've chosen to be there with their own free will. And if there's no violation of rights, then there is no violence that has been conducted. That's the difference between force and violence.